Looks like we're having a couple of, oh, we're having some issues. We're having some connection issues, and I don't understand why, but I digress. So let's try this again. We're gonna try, and we're gonna see if we can make this work. Otherwise, we're gonna have to restart the live. But hopefully we don't. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Plain Rainbows. Well, maybe it is not allowing us to. It is allowing us. It is now allowing us. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Plain Rainbows. Before we begin, I would like to dedicate this specific episode to people who happen to be non-heterosexual or non-cisgendered and are forced to or feel like they have to live in a closet for safety. You deserve to live a life where you can be true to yourself. You are good enough to be worthy of all the good things in life. And today, before we actually start, I have to give you a disclaimer that our guests reflect a diverse set of values, morals, and ethics that may not reflect the morals, values, and ethics of the Misfit Amish. This live stream may also discuss trauma of all sorts to include all types of abuse. Viewers and listeners may find it unsettling and triggering. If this live stream causes you distress, please cease listening until you're able to listen again. You may also, as always, seek support from your trusted folks and qualified mental health professionals. And now I'd like to welcome my co-host, James. Hey, James.
Happy Pride, everyone. Plain Rainbows 5. Woo!
And hi, Michelle. Welcome. So Michelle was invited to be a guest because recently I read this book. It's called Judas Girl. And I wanted to talk to her and I wanted to hear from her. And I wanted all of you to know that sometimes we are unable to come out. Why do you think that is, Michelle? Oh, and welcome. How are you?
Thank you.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Well, we're getting to the meat of stuff, right? That's what we do.
I'm so excited.
Yes. So what we don't like, it's a good question. Why do I think sometimes people don't come out? And there are so many reasons, right? And it's interesting, for me, as you kind of find in this story, coming out isn't just a one-time thing either, right? So there can be multiple reasons. Of course, the way I grew up, one of the reasons I didn't come out is there was not even language to come out with, right? There were no vocabulary, no even understanding. Had there been, at least for me, I would have been considered an abomination. So that's, it's really challenging to, feel good about yourself when you're considered, some kind of aberration, abomination, find a sinful word and apply it. But interestingly, going throughout life, I kind of mentioned, coming out multiple times. I'm currently in, a sort of traditional heterosexual relationship. So people don't necessarily look at me and assume or guess that I'm anything but a traditional heterosexual person. But even writing Judas Girl, where I talk about some of my experiences, just writing that book, I would say acquaintances, casual friends, who even then didn't know that part of my story, right? So even as I was going through life and was very comfortable with myself, there were still people who, maybe they came across somewhat homophobic. Maybe you could just tell they weren't open-minded. I lived for a long time in the deep South or rural South, working, places of work. Even though I was comfortable and open in my lifestyle, there were always challenges. It could impact you professionally. People would respect you less. People would make comments. There would be a lot of gossip. So it's this constant ongoing stream of reasons why somebody may not be out or always be out or be out in every situation, or at least for me, right? For me, there's always reasons. And I probably will be 80 years old, and there will be new reasons that I have discovered that while I'm completely comfortable with who I am, there are situations where I still feel pushed to be silent, and I wish I never felt that way, but it's an ongoing discussion and conversation, and sometimes even a struggle for me.
Thank you. That's a mouthful.
Like, next answer shorter.
what makes you feel like you should be silent?
It's, of course, like I said, when I was younger, the way we were raised was sinful. So I would say from my experience, I know people have different backgrounds and can be raised with sort of different explanations of what homosexuality or anything, I will just say anything that is not cisgendered, heterosexuality, traditional relationship, anything out of that paradigm. I was only taught growing up in the churches that I was in that there was this vague concept that was a really active choice, right? So people would actively choose to do this hideous demonic thing and be in a relationship with somebody of the same sex just to taunt God, right? So when I started having and realizing that I was feeling towards women the same way I felt toward men, I didn't even know what it was, right? I didn't have language to express it, and it was like, well, it can't be whatever this homosexual thing, the word they used was, because I'm not choosing this, right? Like, I'm not deliberately trying to taunt God. So what am I? And I was like, something is wrong with me because other people don't feel this way. But I didn't even have like a language to even ask somebody. But I knew at the same time through subtle cues that if I had asked, right, that it would have not been good for me. And I couldn't tell you why or exactly even how, but I knew very, very deeply that would have not been good for me. And I'll fast forward through life. One of the things, like the company I work for now is very, very progressive, very LGBTQ friendly. I'm part of their LGBTQ, support group, but I have had other, places at work where I would have definitely had impacts to my career, right? So this is totally different from my upbringing, but the silence continued. Where you go to mention a girlfriend or a wife and you just see people's faces turn to stone, and so you're living in this constant state of fear of external judgment, and maybe that's what it boils down to, is like you have to live in fear and constant preparation for whatever backlash may come from somebody. And I think for me, that's one of the things that has always slowed down, I guess, or when I have been reticent to express it, that's one of the things that has prevented it.
So, in a nutshell, you were conditioned to believe that you yourself are the problem.
Exactly.
And that you are a bad person.
Exactly.
And you internalize that, and it feels unsafe to be.
It's all about conformity.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that. My dad would always say to me, you always gotta be different than everyone. And
me
I thought that
too.
was fine.
Yeah.
I thought that was fine. I'm like, that's good.
Well, you had to be different. You're right. It's all about conformity, James. But like it's like this conformity, like you're boxed into these strict gender roles,
Mm-hmm.
and these strict gender roles don't really, like, what you described was like so intense, because it was like you went from one group to the next group to the next group to the next group. And in each of these groups, the one thing that really stands out to me personally is the expectation of strict conformity to gender roles that people expected from you. And those gender roles also came with other expectations. Do you feel like that was grooming you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's this, I would say, almost obsession with heteronormative culture, right? That they have that you have the gender roles, but with gender roles comes your attraction, right? So you are, and there's sort of two sides to the coin. You're not only groomed that you have to be heterosexual, you are also groomed in what the expectations of heterosexuality is, which in my experiences through every single one of those groups was also this sort of subjugation of myself as a female, but also the expectations of my body by males, right? So not only was I only supposed to be attracted to males if I was ever in a relationship with a male, right, in a marriage with a man, which you had to be within a marriage, I was expected to perform for his needs, right? So it wasn't just even heterosexuality. It was a very narrow definition of heterosexuality where I was meant to be a man's sexual property. And that was across every group and across every expression of myself. So yeah, definitely true.
So there was no space for bodily autonomy or personhood where you could exist with any kind of authority. That's what I'm hearing. Like there was no space for that. Like you were just supposed to, godly submission of women also equates to obedience, which is subjugation, and just it enables so much harm to thrive. And I think those norms need to be challenged a little bit. And I'm
more
really
than a little,
grateful.
more than a little.
Really, really grateful. Like at a smidge, at a bare minimum, it needs to be a little bit. Like, come on. Okay. We've all heard about the camel. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle story, right? Like all Anabaptists talk about this story, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So like, I'm hoping that we can be the camel going through the eye of the needle here and challenge that.
Challenge that. Let's do it.
Yeah. So when you're talking about not having the language, so did you have to learn a different language to go join those Anabaptist groups that you belong to?
I mean, so I joined them. So when I say language, I mean more vocabulary, right? So I joined them early. So there was that aspect where most of them were German speaking. But as far as like language goes from a vocabulary perspective, we didn't even use words like heterosexuality or homosexuality. I mean, that was vaguely used. Sexuality in general was not something you talked about. Sexual expression was not something you talked about. I wouldn't have even known how to tell you, right, in either language, whether it was Pennsylvania German or English, I wouldn't have known how to tell you that I have a crush on a female friend. There was no space for that to even exist, right? And I think that's one of the foundations of silencing people in those communities is completely stripping the ability away to even know who you are, right? I couldn't even, had I not had some other experiences or never gotten out, I don't know if I ever would have had the words to know. I could still be sitting there, married with, 15 kids and still not understood what these feelings were, right? By taking that language away, you take the ability away to act on them because you can't even identify yourself.
Well, then I want to point out something that stuck out to me while you were talking. You were talking about the language, but also the invisibility, the silencing, and how that prevents people from even exploring or having the ability to figure out who they are. Did you have queer role models growing up?
Maybe a couple of ducks in the backyard.
A couple of ducks. You know what? I had to ask because I think about this because I don't know how open you have been about your identity and who you are in your journey through all 4 or 5 of those groups of where you came from and the things you've experienced in life in general. I don't know how open you are, but in my personal experience, I am openly gay.
Right.
And I talk about this. I am queer as fuck. It's an undeniable fact, okay? It is what it is. And one of the things that I've experienced is...
Oh, Mary, if the bishop could hear you now.
Well, I just have to let y'all know. I just want you to know that being visible probably means that I'm also a raging homosexual. So just be aware. It might be contagious. Okay, so with all due sarcasm. But...
I could feel it coming to the screen.
Oh my word, Michelle. You should behave yourself.
Yeah, I'm going to start voguing now. We can't stop ourselves.
Do we have to go get the glitter out? But anyways, like I want to share with y'all because I think this is something that needs to be talked about. I didn't have role models either. And I've heard from non-practicing Amish and plain women, some of whom are very, very deeply closeted, some of whom are figuring out where they wish to be. But when they see women from these communities talking about their sexuality or even visibly representing them, whether you know it or not, Michelle, you are being a role model for future generations of both plain and Amish and, both practicing and non-practicing women to say that you exist. Sometimes existing is resistance. And I'm really, really proud of you for that. Thank you for giving us the gift of that.
I really, really appreciate you saying that. And, I've, being, say, more recently in a straight relationship, I've had a few people along the way, kind of come to me in a really nasty way and say, well, why would you talk about this? Like, isn't that disrespectful of your current relationship? Why are you flaunting this when you don't need to? And it's a point, I really, really want to address. And it's for the exact reason that you said it, right? Like I said, except for maybe a couple of ducks in the backyard, that there were no role models. And it was interesting when I have come out of the communities and look back, I have found out that there were other non-straight people. Of course there were, just as many as anywhere. And I want to be there for those people who are still, however they're living, their expression. I want to be there and let them know that they're not, they aren't alone. Like, it was such an encouragement to me when I found out, after coming out of those groups, another individual who I had known came out, and we met up at this auction. And I found he just came out to me like, I'm gay. I was in the closet all of these years. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Like, it was just this amazing moment of like, even though it was just one person, I'm not the only person. I wasn't alone even while I was there, right? I didn't know it, but I wasn't alone while I was there. And I want to be that person, for other people, however, wherever you are in that space. And if you're, in the closet, if you're still even in those communities sneaking a view at this podcast, right? Like, you're normal, and you're not alone. So.
And you're not an abomination.
Definitely not.
And you're good enough to deserve a fulfilling life.
Yeah, I'd say the only abomination is somebody trying to force you to be who you're not, right? Making you feel that you're an abomination, making you feel that you are somehow less or inadequate, and then asking you to submit to often abusive sexual constructs, right? That's the abomination, not you.
Mm-hmm. So in your book, you write about escaping from these insular communities because, as we have established, you went on a Heinz 57 journeys of high control religious group or insular religious groups with your father seeking. I hope he found what he was looking for, by the way, but I digress. Often seekers go through life and they look for things, and, sometimes we have to accept things. There can be a lot of power in accepting things. And that means that the world is not perfect. And it also means that humans are valuable. And it also means that when we say humans are valuable, that includes everybody on this live stream. Mm-hmm. It also means that, when we figure out or when we're informed of things that we have done that are harmful, how do we take accountability for that? And I have questions for your father after reading the book, but that's not for today. That's not for today. But anyways, like my point is like, how do you have like your life today? Like you mentioned, you're in a heterosexual, more traditional marriage today, but how do you come to grips with all of that? Recognizing that this is where you were, this is where you are, these are the experiences along the way, and your whole life is shaped by all of those experiences. How do you reconcile that?
It is a big question. We could take the entire live stream to talk about just that one thing. Reconciling, I guess I kind of went through, this journey, and it may be familiar to some people, where I went through these very coercive backgrounds, with this confusion inside of me, in that situation, it was happened to be non-Anabaptist, but another very coercive fringe Christian group ended up sort of, I won't say forced into a marriage, but sort of in one of those great situations where you only have one choice. So sort of pushed into what was that also a heterosexual marriage, and coming out of that, once I finally was able to break free of that, and there were a lot of reasons, not just, it wasn't an orientation issue per se, it was an abusive, toxic, horrible relationship. I wanted to distance myself as much as I could. I spent my next relationship, I spent almost 11 years with another woman, my ex-wife, not as an act of rebellion, but also it's hard to frame this. She was the person that was right for me at that time. And it was natural to me, and it was part of who I was. But I was also not able at that point, on the flip side, to fully entertain in that space the other half of me that could be attracted to anybody from any gender, right? Like there was a part of me, maybe as part of the healing process, that I kind of had to go all the way the other way and just live in that space for a while, right? And not even explore the other part of myself. So there's sort of this almost inverse silence there where, and again, I'm not saying it was a bad silence necessarily, but it was part of that healing process where I went through sort of that inverse. That relationship ended for multiple reasons. It was just, we had our journey together, and it was time for that journey to be over. And we moved on our separate ways, and are both living happily in other marriages, and, on good terms with each other. But it was sort of coming through that and coming out of that I sort of had that final layer of healing, where I realized I had to accept all of myself. And there's so many facets of that with the way I grew up. But speaking about, say, sexual orientation and gender expression specifically, where, I had to realize that I am all of those things. I am capable of loving a man, a woman, a non-binary person, and to fully be myself, I had to not either revert to those norms that I was raised with, nor live in a space of simply rejecting them, but to fully embrace myself, whatever picture that was, right? And I'm, like I said, I'm currently married to a straight man. That is what came out of that. I met another person. This person happened to be male. We fell in love. We're together now. But it was the whole healing cycle of rejecting who I was, but then also rejecting what I was taught and finding who I was, right? It was a long journey.
Well, thank you for that. I think that that's very common for many people, is when we experience abuse and harm, we tend to go like the exact opposite.
Right.
And it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. Like I think that happens to a lot of people, not just you. But I also think that there's a whole recovery journey, as Michelle said, where you have to embrace like all parts of you.
Right.
Everything that is you. And that was beautifully put. Do you have like any passages you would like to share from your book by chance?
Wow. Okay. So I didn't scroll and underline any. So if you do, go for it.
No. I was just asking because I made a note that was like, it really struck me that queerness was just not allowed to exist. And then how you just described all of that, like that was a journey of more than a decade.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just wondered if you had anything specific you would like anybody to know who may be in that kind of environment where they feel like they're unable to be who they are or accept who they are, or maybe they're going through some of the things you talk about.
I think, like you said, like you highlighted, I know sort of my cycle of healing is probably fairly typical, but we all take different amounts of time. But I think when it comes to, really understanding who you are, that was actually incredibly hard for me with the way I was raised. And I think a lot of us were raised, when you're raised without any focus on who you are as an individual, like we talked about in the beginning, it's all about conformity. So not only is there, say, silence about your sexuality or your gender, the ability to even express your individuality is also silenced, and the ability to also have language to understand sort of your own positioning in the world and toward other people, what you decide is your right path. Like there's not an ability to sort of describe your own morality, right? Like that morality is preached from the pulpit and the church has it written down to the letter and the straight pin, right? So the ability to even consider a world where you have to decide that on your own, right? Here is how I feel. Here is how I choose to act. Here is how I think morally. Like you have to first develop that language. So I got really impatient with myself. I'm sort of a type A perfectionist personality. And I came out and I wanted to know who I was and I was going to act on it and I needed to talk about it. And I didn't even know how to do that, right? Like I wanted to not be what I was, but I couldn't even figure out how to talk about it. So one thing I would say to people is like, be patient. Everybody changes throughout life, but like if you're coming out of something like that, give yourself a ton of grace to just figure out language, figure out who you are, figure out what you like. Even what foods you like, right? I mean, we ate certain very narrow spectrum of cuisine even, right? Like give yourself, explore, have fun, be curious, learn who you are, but be super patient. And know that whatever that is you, and that is okay. That's the way you're made. And whether it's gay, straight, bi, non-binary, pansexual, who loves Indian cuisine and wants to be an activist, whatever that is, like just be curious and learn about yourself, but don't force yourself into it. Just let it come naturally, and you will find yourself the more you slow down and just listen to yourself.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think that is.
Well, what is your sign, Michelle? Your astrology sign?
I am a Gemini.
A Gemini. Explain
Okay,
so much.
Yes.
I'm a Pisces, so
Okay.
I'm an Aries, so
okay.
we do well here.
We've got a lot going on.
we could yes, we've got a lot going on. And how is it that we all know our signs now? Oh, this is funny. Totally off topic.
I wouldn't have had that language back then either.
I wouldn't have either.
I would have no clue.
But this is such an important topic. I think people could really benefit from reading your book just to see how, at one moment you're engaged in this culture, in this environment, and you're trying to conform to these strict heterosexual norms, these strict gender roles. And the next moment, it's like you escape, you make a plan and you get out and you escape. And now all of a sudden you're with a woman. And it's like, wait, what?
What happened?
Okay. Yeah, what happened? Like, how did this happen? Like, what went down? And then you end up separating, because sometimes people's journeys in life really, sometimes people are only in our lives for a season. And I forget who said that, but that is really the truth.
That's beautiful.
And that season ended, and then you entered into a different relationship. Here's the thing, relationships look different. Love can look different, from romantic love to platonic love to familial love. But essentially, when you talk about figuring out who you are, do you feel like you're comfortable spending time with yourself? Do you love yourself to the point where you love spending time with yourself?
I do. And again, I want to just note how taboo that would have been to say back where I was grown up, to say the sentence, I love myself. So I would challenge anybody who has not said that. If you're new on this podcast, like go stand in the mirror and say that. Like, that is so powerful. But I am, and I got there. And there is a passage, I don't have it underlined in front of me in the book, but that was really one of my epiphanies right at the end, where I realized that for the first time, I actually loved myself. And that was also a part of my identity that had been repressed, right? We were not, at least where I grew up, we were not supposed to love ourselves. I mean, that was selfish. So
Oh, yeah.
I love being with myself. I love being in my own head. Sometimes I wonder what the hell is going on in there, but we're comfortable in there. We can talk about it. We can, be honest about it. We can poke fun at each other in there, but like, we're good. Like, it's a good time in there. And I do, I know I'm not perfect. I know I've got a lot to learn. I hope I grow as a person, but along the way, when I fall down and, skin my proverbial knee, I'm going to be like, hey, you're good. I love you. We've got this. Get back up. So yeah, it was a journey, but that was really where it ended for me is, however my life unfolds, I have that. And I didn't have that at the start of this journey.
Yeah. Do you have any more thoughts, James?
Well, when you talk about self-love, I feel like, at least coming from the Amish community, like, nobody loves themselves because you don't really know yourself, because you're so busy trying to conform so that you can fit in and gain other people's approval and love, which really isn't love, but you're trying to secure your place in a place that will pull the rug out from under you in a heartbeat and throw you to the wolves. So on some level, we all know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is true. I did wonder, like, what makes you feel empowered to speak out and to be out of the closet?
Me? Well, I think that's what it is. I mean, it is self-love, but in that, I think one of the things, I think we were always taught that loving yourself prevented you from loving other people. Whereas I found the opposite, right? The more I love myself, the more I love other people. And so I don't want anybody else, to also go through what I went through. So the more comfortable and confident I am in my own skin, the more I want that for everybody else. And, there may be a few people that see this and unfollow my page or cancel their order or, be like, hey, I didn't know that about her. We're not going to hang out. And that's their problem, right? I love who I am. You don't have to love who I am. But I want that for you. I want you to love who you are. And that's, that is, I think, what makes me comfortable to be out. Like, why would I hide that if it can help somebody else, and what reason do I have not to share that with anybody,
And this is my final question, and then we're going to wrap it up. But my final question is, so when you published this book, did you expect any backlash from writing openly about your relationship that you had with a woman?
I don't know if expect is, yeah, I would say expect is probably the right word. I have not gotten negative feedback yet, which has been a real, I've been really thankful for, so far. I've gotten the opposite, people, maybe mentioning that, hey, they didn't know that and they feel heard. I do expect at some point to get some comments along the way. And if that's the way you feel, and I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you have to live in that mindset and with that pain of judging other people, but that's you, and we'll go forward and it will help more people along the way.
Uh-huh. I mean, and I would just back you up by saying, like, if you don't want a homosexual relationship, don't enter into one, okay?
Don't
like,
have one.
Just don't have one. It's that simple. Like, yeah. You're not, yeah. That's really good advice. Thank you. And do we have any final thoughts, y'all?
From me, just thank you. Thank you for having me on here. Hopefully, hopefully somebody will will feel slightly less alone after hearing this today, maybe feel more empowered in their, space of silence to come out of it. But yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everything you both do on this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for writing that book. I mean, sharing your story, that's really amazing. And, it's going to help a lot of Amish people that are still in the community. And for us, even though it seems strange to people that didn't grow up in our community, we're still book readers. We still read books. And that's how we share our stories. Podcasts, yeah, okay. A few Amish might have some smartphones, but for the most part, they're book readers.
And we're going to read. And people you may never know are going to be impacted in a very positive way because you chose to be brave and you felt empowered to share your life experiences with us. And I'm really grateful and honored that I get to know you. I've known you for a couple years now. I'll never forget how scared I was when the first time we met up. I was like so scared.
If you knew what a dork I was, you wouldn't have.
I didn't know nothing. I just knew that I was like openly gay, and like here's this person that wants to meet. But anyways, Ryan wants to know, where can we find Michelle? So if you'd like to tell our viewers and listeners where they can find you and where they can buy your book, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is michellestuartauthor.com, just spelled like it's seen here. You can find me on Facebook, Michelle Stewart Author, same name for Instagram. And if you just want to Google Judas Girl Book, you can also find that on any platform where books are sold.
Thank you for that. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this live stream. I appreciate you being here, and I think it's amazing that this is what we're on, like season 5. I never thought we would get to this point.
Wow.
I am just honored by all the guests that have come before you, all the people that have reached out to us, and the people who have reached out to guests that have been on this podcast. I think that one of the best ways you can help us is by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing, as always. And I want to thank the Misfit Amish Patreon subscribers who have helped pay for this live stream today. I'm always so grateful for that. And I have a small announcement that pretty soon, hopefully if all goes well, your donations should be tax-free. We're just working on it, and it is coming soon. Some of the art used in this podcast and this live stream was produced by BJK and myself. And until next time, please live your best lives. Know that you deserve good things in life.